Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, it's pretty much the Chris Tarr show coming up. I'm feeling under the weather, so Chris Tarr is pretty much taking over the whole show, but he's got great information for us. It's coming up next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionics Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
So welcome to This Week in Radio Tech, episode number 577. Somewhere, Kirk Harnack is hopefully done hacking up his lung. This is episode 577. There you go, Kirk. I did the introduction for you.
You're doing a great first job, a day on the job here. Glad we hired you back.
I have a little experience. So Kirk is under the weather today, so we're going to, let him rest his voice a little bit. And the episode today is going to be, I've dreamed of this all my life, all about me. Well, okay, not all about me. But Kirk and I have been talking over the years about all of the different things that I've been doing and with engineering, you name it, I've been doing it. And it's been a whole lot of fun. And especially, with the pandemic having gone on, there's a lot of people that aren't really doing much. And I've been doing a lot. So I figured I'd let you all live vicariously through what I've been doing. Is that right, Kirk?
That is right. I think we're good for a few seconds. We're going to let people know that our show is brought to you in part by Radio Guide. And here's Chris Tarr to tell you all about radio-guide.com. Chris?
Radio Guide is a fantastic magazine for radio professionals, especially radio tech guys. Over the years, I've written a lot of columns for them. The editor, Ray Top, is a fantastic guy. Best of all, you can get it online. You can get it delivered to your house. It is absolutely free. They have some great, I'm trying to think of some of the columns they have. They usually do something about FCC rules. They do something technical. They usually do some equipment reviews. Also, what I love about it, there you go, the chief engineer column right there with some great tips on what you can do. They also, believe it or not, it's one of the magazines I look for the ads because they've got so many new ads for gear coming out that it's kind of how I keep on top of all of the things that I'm trying to do. So a lot of good people write for this. I do it. There's a whole bunch of, well, there you go. There's a great example of some of the things you can learn in Radio Guide magazine. I've, again, like I said, a lot of really good, solid engineers do writing for Radio Guide. Ray's done a great job of getting a stable of people together, and it's out there to help you. And again, you can't beat the price. It is absolutely free, and they are a proud sponsor of This Week in Radio Tech, and we thank them for that. And that alone should get you to subscribe because, hey, they like us, we like you, you like them. It's a big, happy family. So Radio Guide magazine, you can check them out online. Is it radioguide.com? Radio-guide.com?
Radio-guide.com.
There you go. You can check them out online, get the online version there, or subscribe to the magazine as well. So there you go.
As I always say, I like the fact that they allow room for longer articles. So they're not limited to 1,500 words or so. You can have some articles that take as long as it takes to explain the subject matter in some pretty good depth.
Right. And that's what I love writing for them is Ray kind of just says, hey, put down your thoughts, don't worry about, long or short or whatever, put in there what you need to put in. And, the other thing that Ray's been great about is, as I get busy, he kind of just says, hey, you write whenever you want about whatever you want, just, there's no pressure. If you're busy, don't worry about it. If you got an article in you, write something out and send it to me. He's just a really, really good guy and does it just out of, desire to serve the industry. And I think that's really great.
Oh, Chris, because people have asked in reference to my being sick, no, I don't have the Rona. I've got tested twice for that. Wouldn't be embarrassed if I did. I mean, hey, Whoopi Goldberg got it. Everybody's getting it. But I've had this terrible case of bronchitis. And what I've learned is that if you get a cold or flu and you're getting that stuff down in your lungs, as so often I do, heck on it, take a break, go lay down, go get some rest. Because if you just keep on going, last week I had to drive to Georgia. I had to have a legal meeting on a house closing for my dad. There's things I had to do. I guess we could have postponed it all, and maybe I wouldn't have gotten so sick. But man, I spent New Year's Eve in a hospital emergency room trying to
Oh
breathe.
man.
So yeah, you don't want to. Yeah, what a way to ring in 2022.
Right. It's like it's just this endless loop. Room. You're back in 2020 again. Can't get over it.
Obviously, I mentioned before, I appreciate you taking over for the show today. It is all about you. We are going to do some commercial breaks in a few minutes, but Chris, it's been a while since you've been on the show, and as we announced last week, you've agreed to be a regular co-host. And I checked with our HR department when you left here, you left on good terms, and so I was glad to hear that. I was a little worried about that. We did do a background check, and that was mostly negative. Mostly okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
mostly
we're good.
Good. Well, I'm surprised with the mostly because typically that's not even close. So I'll take it. So I guess. Go ahead.
We're delighted to have you back. And this episode, and I'll shut up. This episode, I want to know what you've been doing since you've been gone. You've had you've got a new position, and I think a lot of folks know about that. But you're blowing and going. You're in charge of a bunch of radio stations engineering, and you get to set the standards. You get to set the policies, and you get to work with the owner directly to say, okay, what are we going to spend money on? What are we not going to spend money on? What are we going to take care of really well? What are we going to let slide until we get budget next time? Well, whatever it may be. And so you've got some projects that I'd love to hear about. Of course, as we usually try to do on This Week in Radio Tech, and you're so good at it, is not only tell a story, but tell us what you learned from it and what can we know and learn and have in our back pocket going forward. So maybe if there's a mistake made, we don't make that mistake again. If we could have a watchful eye out for some condition, great. If there's some new technology that helps us solve a problem that maybe we didn't have this available to us 2, 3, 5 years ago, or just didn't know about it. Maybe there's a technology from another discipline, that's not broadcasting, right? Maybe there's something that you found that helps you out, that, hey, I can apply this to broadcasting. So that's what I'm eager to hear about. And I'm going to shut up for about the next 55 minutes and let you go on, except for a few brief commercial breaks. So, Chris,
okay, great.
So delighted. I mean, I'm my socks rolling up and down to have you back.
I'm really glad. You're making me blush. So, you and I met on the September 11th, many, many years ago. And it's funny. There's a picture floating around of you and I. Now fast forward to now, you look older. I look great. But that's when I started at X Media. I was there. They're now out of business, and I think they're now morphed into Alpha Media. But I left for Intercom in 2004, and I was their director of engineering for the Milwaukee and Madison stations. And I was there for 16 years, and it was a great run. I did some fantastic things there. But I got to the point where if I wanted to stay with Intercom and I wanted to, grow my skills and move up, I was going to have to leave Wisconsin and go to one of our larger stations. Well, I'm born and raised here. My family lives here. And so I really didn't want to leave. And I was trying very hard to stay in the area where I'm at. Meanwhile, probably 15 years ago, I ran into a gentleman named Dave Magnum. And Dave is an entrepreneur, big radio guy, big fan of radio, just like me, started on the air in high school. And he, is slowly buying these radio stations. And I ran into him. He was actually selling one, which is pretty rare for him. But I knew the buyer. He was a friend of mine, and I was doing the due diligence. And I managed to spend some time with Dave while we were doing that. And Dave and I hit it off. We have a very similar backgrounds and same kind of love of radio. And so, we had a great time. And after that, through the years, we always kind of kept in touch and just back and forth a little bit. And then probably 3 years ago, he needed somebody to do some due diligence for some stations he was looking at. So he asked if I would be willing to come in and do that for him. So I met up with him and we went and did that. And again, had a great time. And so that was it. And, again, we would keep in touch. And finally, when things were starting to really get changing at Intercom, and I knew that it was probably time to think about something else, I kind of planted the seed with some friends of mine and said, hey, I'm looking to move up. I don't want to leave the state. If you guys hear of anything, pass it along. And probably 2 hours later, I get a call from Dave. And he said, we need to talk. I said, okay, well, let's talk. So we went out to dinner and, again, keep in mind, he has got a small group of radio stations. There's a lot of them, but they're all in smaller areas throughout the state. So we had this conversation and he said, well, up until recently, I've just used contract engineers and I've managed it. And it's been okay as we grow. It's been harder and harder. Well, we're getting set to close on some more properties. And I really think it's time to hire a director of engineering to run the engineering operation for my group. And I said, okay, but let me tell you the deal that I have at Intercom. And, I said, I got to be honest with you. They're a big company. They pay pretty well, this and that. So I explained it to him, didn't miss a beat, looked at me, went, well, we're still here. We haven't walked away. So there you go. And the rest was history. That's a family owned company. It's Dave. Sadly, his wife passed away many years ago, but he has two sons who are both in the business. His son, Reed, is the general manager. He went to business school, just a brilliant mind. He was just written up in Radio Inc., I believe it was last year, one of the 20 under 30 guys, and he's just a really good guy. And then his son, Ty, works with me in engineering. Ty's a really good IT guy. He also helps with the programming of the stations and that sort of thing. So when I say it's a family company, it really is. Billing is handled by Reed's wife. So there's really, there's 4 Magnums in control, and then there's me. So I'm kind of the 5th Magnum. But it's been interesting because I have kind of a clean slate. So, each contract engineer in each market kind of had their own way of doing things. So each facility, each market was different. And part of the thing I needed to do was start standardizing on things. And what is really great about working for a local family owned company is as I start to do these things, I just make a phone call. There's no committees, there's no paperwork, there's no anything. So, a great example is today, I noticed that BSW had a sale on some B stock tuners, and I've been looking at getting them. And I called David. I said, hey, there's a great deal on these tuners. He said, great, get them. It really was not, there was your answer. So it really is. It's a close-knit group of people, and he is just a great guy to work for. And in fact, picture number 1 here is what he got me for my vehicle for going around to the different sites, if you want to bring that up. He was really pleased with this. He's the one who got the Doc Tar plates. He thought that was fantastic. So we just took one of the stations that's nearest to me, which is WVTY. We put the logos on there. And then, he went and got the license plates for me. And he did a big reveal, and it was great. But it really is, it kind of signifies, this is the kind of thing he does, and this is, how he treats his people. Tells me all the time, how grateful he is that I'm working with him, and he always reminds me, I can't say I work for him, I work with him. But that's just one of those little things that shows his appreciation, and that's great. I get to drive that all over the place. So, another interesting thing is right after I started working for him or with him, you would yell at me for that, working with him. It was last year. We're right in the middle of COVID, and everything is shut down. He managed to do a $2 million purchase of 2 separate groups in the middle of a pandemic and get it done because he has these relationships he's had forever locally with bankers and lawyers and accountants and everything. So again, it's one of those, we're very fast, we're very nimble, we can get things done, but it also added 7 more stations to my roster. And that's what he was like, well, that's why I told you. That's why we hired you. We've got this stuff going on. So now with that background out of the way, we have, I want to say 23 full power signals and another 15 translators that do AMs or HD subchannels or things like that. And we're basically from the lakeshore on the east side of the state to the river on the west side of the state. So we span pretty much along the freeways in Wisconsin. We have stations all over the place. So each one is a little bit different, and each one has been kind of put together differently. So one of the most fun things I've had to do is start to standardize and make incremental improvements and really kind of bring them into the current realm of technology. Because again, it's not that he wasn't willing to spend the money to do the upgrades like a lot of small market stations are. It's that when you have contract engineers, their job is to keep you on the air, and that's about it. They don't really look at the bigger picture and ask the questions about what you're trying to accomplish and how to use technology to do that. So a lot of these stations had outdated technology. They all had different audio issues and different technical issues. And so I kind of dove headfirst into fixing all of those types of things immediately and then coming up with a long range plan. But the fun part is that we want to be creative. I need to be a good steward of the group's money. I mean, again, it's not a big corporation where we can sell some more stock to raise some money to do things. It comes right out of the owner's bank account, and it comes out of our bank account. And as he likes to say, it's our company. So if I spend money, I'm spending our money. So I have to be very creative. So
Hey, Chris,
if we go to, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt your thought, but you said something that really brought up a question for me. Um, um, by the way, I think I hacked up the thing that was causing me so much trouble, so I'm
good,
feeling a little better now. Yeah, everybody, is that TMI? Everybody worried about that? You said that you take over some stations engineering wise, and there's some immediate audio or other problems to solve, and yet you've also got some medium and long range plans for standardization and how you like to do things.
Mm-hmm.
How do you make that decision of, do I fix this right now, or do I speed up the implementation of maybe a longer range plan? Well, let's go ahead and get that new piece of equipment in here, because otherwise I'm going to spend 3 days fixing this or a day fixing this, and then I'm just going to replace it, 2 months from now. How do you make that decision about, all right, do I fix what's here right now, or do I make it part of my plan for improvement, and how do I adjust that? I guess it depends on the severity and the cost and
Sure.
all those usual factors, right?
That's an excellent question. And actually, in a minute here, we'll show coincidentally the next two pictures I have relate to that.
Okay.
But the immediate things are obviously things like, are we on the air? What's the audio quality like? Are transmitters staying on? That sort of thing. Those were the immediate things I needed to fix. Our streaming was really unreliable in all of our markets. The streams would be up and down, or we didn't have silent sensors. If stations were silent, we didn't know. And I mean, obviously that's a huge thing, because we wouldn't know until the next morning, the morning show came on, or, something like that, or we'd get, somebody that lives in that area to call us. So it was just those things alone. I said, okay, what are the things that we immediately need to do to get that level of reliability and the standard that I have set for off air time? What do we do just to do that? So that was really the first plan that I came up with, was just, and I don't want to say this in a negative way, but kind of stop the bleeding, fix the immediate. These are main big problems. Then the second one is to triage, right? And then the second one was, okay, what are some efficiencies that we can put in place immediately to deal with people working from home, and to deal with, making it easier to manage? Because the last thing we want is, we were having to do this where we would have to drive from market to market to take care of IT issues and things like that. Well, what are the things we can do to fix that? Well, I implemented a VPN in all of our buildings, bought security appliances, connected them all together. So now I can log into one entry point and access all of our markets. And the guy who helps me with IT, Ty, can do the same thing. And that was a game changer. That alone was a game changer. We were using Dropbox and all these other things to transfer files around. And now, all the computers see each other. So, we're able to put in file servers that back each other up. So, that was number two. Their biggest fear was, well, what if we lose this stuff? So, okay, that's a priority. So we took care of that. And now, we do a lot of local sports. So the question was, we're using cell phones and they sound horrible. What can we do? So now we're starting to implement the solution with Lucy Live. So, it's an ongoing process. And then, in the midst of all of that, you have other things that break or that come up, and those become immediate priorities. But one of the things that I try to do in my position is find opportunities to make improvements without spending a lot of money, or at least spending money wisely. So that means sometimes I don't go ahead and just buy new transmitters right away because I think we might need one. I tend to wait until the opportunity is right. And that's going to be this next picture here, number 2. This was a main transmitter for one of our big stations. In fact, the one that was on my Jeep, WVTY. The picture number 2 is the old transmitter that was in there. And as you can see, we're taking it out with our trusty little guy. I don't remember what those are called, forklift. So that was a transmitter they had for a long time. It was okay, and we didn't have a lot of problems with it. But it's a tube transmitter, and it's older, and it's going to cause problems at some point in a market that is Milwaukee. So it's a pretty important city for us. So what happened was I happened to be looking around and I found online a gentleman who was selling, and you can go to number 3 now, a gentleman who was selling a Noctal transmitter. Well, the thing about these transmitters is they're not frequency agile. And so it was in Reno, and it happened to be on the same frequency. And it's in beautiful shape, and he was selling it for a song. I mean, it was like $5,000, I think. And so I, again, called the owner and said, here is a great situation that just came up. We can get a solid state transmitter that's in fantastic shape on our frequency, and it'll be $5,500. And it replaces the tube transmitter. And he jumped right on it. He's like, okay, where do we send the check? We're going to do it right now. And literally by the end of the day, I had it paid for. But this is a great example of, I really would have liked to have bought a new transmitter for this site. It was on my list of, older transmitters we probably need to replace. But I didn't, my first instinct wasn't to just go and order a new transmitter. I held back, and the right opportunity came up and we jumped. And that's one of the great things about being small, is we can do that. So that was that kind of situation. And again, that kind of goes with triage. And we have a few things in here that we'll get to next.
Hey, Chris, we're gonna take a quick break, and all I do have a question about that Noctal. You said it was with those Noctals. You say they need to be on the same frequency, right? They're not really very frequency agile.
The older ones. That's one of the first early FM models. The new ones are frequency agile, but the older ones aren't.
And it was in Reno. Did you have it shipped, or did somebody go to Reno and get it?
I didn't know. I actually had it shipped. It was really fairly inexpensive. I think it was $800 or something. I was thinking about going to Reno. But no. So yeah, we come back. We'll take a look at some of the other fun things we've been doing.
Chris Tarr is my new permanent, as long as HR gives the thumbs up, permanent co-host of This Week in Radio Tech. I really appreciate Chris Tarr answering the call. And today we're featuring Chris and what he's been doing, and what he had a whole lot of experience. When you jump into a new job, and you all of a sudden are running things that didn't have anybody running them before, like Chris is, you can learn a lot, do a lot, and get a lot of good experience under your belt. Probably stub your toe a couple times, and that's what Chris is going to be telling us about, what he found out and what works and what doesn't. Our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by Broadcast Bionics and the Camera One system. We'll be right back.
Camera One from Broadcast Bionics. Designed to bring video to your audio content. Visualizing radio and podcasts for social media. Camera One can automatically create, capture and brand professionally switched video for live streaming or upload, making your production shareable. Control and configure using a web browser on any device. Camera One is available as a 4-camera or 8-camera system using the Blackmagic A10 Mini range, including the A10 Mini Extreme. You can use cameras to suit your studio and your budget. You'll need one camera for a studio wide shot, and usually one camera per microphone. A standard multi-channel sound card or IP driver monitors audio from each studio microphone, and we work natively with Axia systems. Ideally, this will be a post-fader feed from each mic, although you can use pre-fade audio or a mic split if that's all you have available. These audio levels are used to intelligently switch the video feed when each contributor is talking. You can also group microphones together into one shot and use the audio from a mixer's aux bus. You can use Camera One's auto switch feature, or disable it and switch using the on-screen buttons or the buttons on the A10. Recordings can automatically start when you tell the system you're on the air. This on-air indication can be linked to your studio's red lights via IP or an Avantec Adam GPIO interface. You can quickly browse all the videos that have been automatically created during your broadcast, download them and post. Camera One is a user-installable system. You'll need a good spec Windows 10 PC, i7 with plenty of storage and 16 gig of RAM. It's better if this machine isn't used for anything else. Remember, you can control the software in a web browser on another device on your network. Camera One, a thrifty way of creating scroll-stopping video from your show or podcast from Broadcast Bionics.
Really cool stuff from Broadcast Bionics. You ought to check it out at bionic.radio. That's the website, bionic.radio, or just Google Broadcast Bionics. And you'll see not only Camera One, but the other really cool social media integrations, phone systems, and other things that they have to help you run radio stations and do a great job with it. Thanks a lot to Broadcast Bionics for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Chris Tarr is here, and he is regaling us with some let's see, acts of daring do, or at least learning, or stubbing his toe. Which is it,
Or
Chris?
a little of column A, a little of column B, I would think.
Yeah.
So
Let's roll with it. Go ahead.
Let's roll. So one of the next things here with all of this is, obviously running into sites that have been neglected maintenance-wise. And again, that's no fault of anybody other than there's been no plan. The contract engineers have been by to fix things and keep them on the air, but that's about it. So I run into things like this, and if you want to put up, we're going to skip number 4. If you can put up picture number 5, this is a situation I ran into, and I kind of touched on this last week with one of our facilities in La Crosse. This is an AM site, and this, we have a bunch of land that goes well past that satellite dish, and back there was a homeless camp. And they were back there and causing issues, breaking into the building and that sort of thing. Not only that, but it being an AM site, that's really not, you can see the guy wires going into the trees and, it just, nobody's touched it for a long, long time. So I had hired a crew and we came in, and if you show picture number 6, this is the after when we went through and cleaned everything out. So as you can see, we have all that land back there. All of that is cleaned out now. The site is wide open. You can see it. There are, there's not any places really to hide back there. And the signal is performing much better. But though there's a situation there where, the owner didn't really understand that could be, he knew, but didn't really know the extent of the problem. So we brought a crew out and cleaned this all out, and he looked at it and went, oh my goodness. But that's, a great example of, when you take over a position in a big market, this is routine stuff. So you don't really find situations where you're having to really do a lot of work just to bring things up to a standard level, a basic level, and then trying to take it, to the next level after that. So we'll go to picture number 7, which is, this is the rack in the basement of the building in La Crosse where we bought the stations this last year. This has already been cleaned out quite a bit. We're still working on it. But as you can see, there's a whole lot less equipment in there and a whole lot more networking. One of the things we've been doing in all of our sites, and this is where my job is to teach our staff what this technology can do for us. So I put in Axia here, X node, a couple of X nodes actually. And you can see in probably the third rack from the right there, halfway down, there's some small streaming boxes. Those are the computers that I've standardized for streaming for all of our markets. They're inexpensive. They're solid state drives. They run really well. They're very reliable. And so that's what we're doing our streams on. But a little farther up, you can see the Axia node there. And I explained to them how with Axia, we can route audio from anything to anything without having to use noisy analog switchers and, really affecting our audio. And Ty, who assists me with IT, one of the owner's sons, is just a really good IT guy. And he came up with a way, we use Simian for automation. He came up with a way to use Simian to actually change the mix inside of, change the mixer inside of the nodes. So we can now use that instead of a broadcast tools switcher to switch satellite programming and sports and all these different types of things. We have a machine in there that handles Lucy Live for sports, and literally the announcer at the game connects in on Lucy, and we fire a trigger on Simian, and it puts Lucy and Simian on the air at the same time, and he can do his sports game, fire everything, and when he's done, puts the Simian back on the air directly. So, they started to learn things like that. We were paying board ops to do that. And, I said, hey, you don't really need that. I mean, we can do this all automatically and with better quality than we had before. And, the minute I showed him that, we ended up putting them in all of our facilities because he saw the value in that technology upgrade of, all of these things that we can do now with automation and with Axia. And oh, by the way, our audio quality is so much better. And one of the reasons why is if you look at picture number 8, we can switch to that. This was the board that had all of the analog wiring for the facility.
Oh, wow. Oh.
And it was a mess. And as you can see, we still have a little bit more to go, but we removed all of it. We didn't need it. With Axia, we just had a node upstairs where the studios were and the node downstairs and, Cat 5 cable and connected it all up. So,
Chris, I know that we haven't had audio over IP forever. I get that. And we've borrowed a lot of technologies from the phone company with 66 punch blocks and things like that. But when was it ever a good idea to use those screw terminals and crimp spade lug connectors what a lot of work and a lot of real estate for just hooking two things together. I'm not saying I've never done it because I have, but that was back in the mid 80s when I was doing that. Maybe that dates from the mid 80s, but I can't imagine.
Obviously 66 blocks have been around forever. And with those, I think, there's some ease in being able to make changes if you need to. You can just unscrew a couple of terminals and move them. I got to guess it's something like that. But you're right. And think about all the opportunities for noise to get into the signal. And, we were constantly, as we were working on these racks, losing, channels and phase and all this other stuff because wires were just kind of barely hanging on. And
a lot of that.
And we had an issue where we had a broadcast tool switch fail. And all you heard on the air was the audio with because the relay wasn't making contact. So again, the Axia notes are fairly affordable, but it's something that our staff didn't know about. They had no experience with that, and what they heard about it, they assumed it was really expensive and out of their reach. And once I showed them that it was not only was it affordable, but it replaces all of that noisy wiring and it creates ways to automate workflows so that, and you've used this before too. It's really slick with the live wire switcher. I can't remember the exact name yet.
Either Pathfinder or the simple delegation switcher.
Simple delegation switcher. I was able to put that on machines up in the studios and say, okay, when you're done on the air, hit this button, and it's just going to route our automation system directly to air. Mm-hmm. And that's all they got to do. It's just a big button. And we actually then later on figured out a way to do it just as a macro in Simian. So then you don't have to hit the button. They just, the log is up and it just switches and they walk away. And, we don't have to worry about people accidentally being on the air because the board was live and we didn't know or, anything like that. It was just amazing. And it just added a whole other dimension to our product.
This is one of the things I really like about discovery. And I like hearing you talk about discovery of how that adopting a technology can end up leading to a whole lot more conveniences. When people adopt audio over IP, if they just kind of jump into it, they find it's really quite serendipitous. You end up getting to do way more than the salesman ever told you were going to be able to do.
I say, and there's that whole kind of hacking into it too. Trial and error and learning. That's how we got the Simian interface to work because there wasn't really one that did input, output, and that sort of thing. And we were sitting there looking at the simple delegation switcher, and we went, "There's got to be a way to send those commands from Simian to the X node. I mean, there's got to be." And we sat there for hours just kind of playing with different things. And finally, Ty had this, light go on and go, "Hey, I can send commands this way. Let's try it with this format from here." And sure enough, it worked great. And that opened up an entire new world for us for being able to automate this stuff. And it just took, an afternoon of playing, going, okay, let's see if this works. Nope, doesn't work. Why? Okay, let's try this. And we could have just put the nodes in and called it a day. But it's all about experimentation. And I encourage everyone I work with to expand those boundaries. Don't just assume that it can't be done. Let's look at it, let's break it, and let's see if we can make it work better. And in the end, this was a huge thing for us, because when you have all of these stations that run Symbian and you have all of these nodes and you're using all of these old switchers, all of that stuff goes away. I mean, it's all IP, and it sounds so much better and works so much better. And again, the investment is really no more than a decent distribution amplifier and a broadcast tool switch. So, in the end, it works out really, really well. We're going to skip over the next one. We're going to go to number 10. And I had the same AM station that we were talking about earlier. I put in a new transmitter and it wouldn't stay on the air. And I took out my handy antenna analyzer, and would you look at that? There is a dead short in there somewhere. And it was funny because we were scratching our heads about why this transmitter wouldn't stay on. It's a brand new transmitter, and we'll show you. And yeah, that was it. So we started looking around, and we opened up the surge suppressor, and it turned out that the connector to the antenna had burned up and was just open. And so we went, okay, I guess that's your problem. And we made some changes and bypassed it. And then we got to picture number 11, and the transmitter was happy once again. This little device is fantastic, and I recommend, if you're out in the field, you get one of these, because I want to say they're $300 or $400. It's called a RigExpert, and it's actually made for ham radio. Yeah. It's actually designed for ham radio, but it goes from 500 kilohertz, I think, up to past the FM band. And this is a great example of, I could have sat there and trial and error until the transmitter was happy, but what I did is I took the output of the transmitter into that and got that first reading. Then I connected that back up, and I shot down the end of the line past the failed component, and I saw that, and I went, okay, there's our problem. We know right away where the problem lies. And it took me maybe 20 minutes to troubleshoot it. That could have taken an hour or two without a device like that. So I strongly recommend it's called a RigExpert. And, you can get, I think, hamradio.com, the ham radio outlet, I believe, sells those. And they're fantastic. They're worth way more than what they sell them for.
I'll put a link in the show notes. If people want to click on that, they can find them in the show notes.
Right. And there's an example again where I said to Dave, I said, we really should get one of these, because it just saves a lot of time. And he said, yep, well, let's get it. We also got a spectrum analyzer that way too. Number 12 is another example of where we spent some money smartly. That's a Noctal J1000. And you can tell on the left, that was our original backup transmitter, the old venerable RCA AM1 something. I can't remember what they call those, but that was the backup transmitter. The main transmitter is to the right of that, and that was an MW1 that, again, it worked, but it's not super reliable. The audio quality isn't as good. And with the Noctal 1,000-watt transmitters, they become very affordable. And so I took Dave aside and I said, listen, this AM station is really important to us. We're playing music. These two transmitters are really old. For a minimal investment, we can get a new transmitter. The RCA will go away, and I gave it to a ham operator who took it. And then we can use this current transmitter as a backup. And, we talked about the pros and cons, and he said, yeah, let's do it. That makes a lot of sense. So we put that on the air, and it was happy. Number 13 is another site that we have out in the middle of nowhere. And you'll see in a minute, I have a picture of the road, one of the roads leading up to the site. This is in La Crescent, Minnesota, right on the other side of the river from La Crosse. And again, it's something that we're cleaning up, and we're having to, take over from, the last company that we bought it from, and they were somewhat small stations. But as you can see, that's HD, and that has, a couple of multi-channels on it. One of the things we did, and again, this is where creative thinking comes in, and why Dave really likes working with me and how we think about these things, is we have the La Crosse area is right on the river, and there's the Wisconsin side and the Minnesota side, and there are different utilities on either side. We have two big FMs in that market. One of them is on the La Crosse side on the Wisconsin side, and this one is on the Minnesota side. Well, we don't really, because we bought them from small operators. There's no backup transmitters and there's no generators. So if something goes down, we're in trouble. Well, I came up with the idea of putting in aux licenses and flip them. So this station has an aux license over on the Wisconsin side. And as you can see on the transmitter on the left, our FM in the Wisconsin side has an aux site here. And the theory is, and it's been proven out already, that you'll probably have power on one side and not, if power goes out on one side of the river, it's probably going to be okay on the other because they're served by two completely different entities. So by doing this, we saved a lot of money from having to buy backup transmitters and generators and things like that and still keep it on the air. We've already used it. We did lose power on the Wisconsin side. There was a big, almost citywide outage, and I threw on the backup for the Minnesota side and we stayed on the air. Now, before we bought that station, we just would have been off, and that was it. So those are some of the creative things you have to think of because we don't have the budget to go buy new backup transmitters and generators and things like that, but there's solutions out there. And this is a solution that cost us, I had to buy an antenna. So it was, maybe $1,000. And the transmitter was there. It was already a backup for something else. It was a station that we sold. So it wasn't being used. So I just reused some equipment that we had and bought an antenna. And now we have backup solutions for both of those large stations that we have without spending a whole lot of money. So that's one of those things where, you have to think really creatively in this situation. Now, had that been intercom, I probably would have just said, yeah, let's buy some new transmitters and we'll get that done. And they would have spent the money. But in this case, we can't do that. So I see we got to take a break here. And when we come back, I still have just a couple of more pictures and then we can talk a little bit about some of the things we've seen here.
Chris, we're going to do a little unboxing here. You see this?
Oh,
this
nice.
This is from Hank Landsberg at Henry Engineering. Shipped it to me, and we're going to open this up. Now, if you've been a fan of the show, you've seen this before, but it's always fun to do an unboxing. This is the Henry Superlight. And remember how Howard Stern was told by Pig Vomit that he had to say WNBC, right? Remember that?
Yes. Oh yeah.
You have to pronounce this Superlight. Superlight. Superlight.
All right. Superlight. Got it.
So inside the Superlight, well, of course, it comes with a power supply, like almost everything does. That is a little 12-volt wall wart. Okay, that's a given. Mm-hmm. But the cool thing is it's 12 volts. And that means that if you want to supply your own 12-volt power, you certainly can. So the Superlight is this little box right here. Now, we've all grown up using products from Henry Engineering because he makes useful stuff to build radio stations with. And we've probably all used a bunch of the Henry Super Relay. Chris, have you ever used a Super Relay?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I have them all over.
Are you old enough to have broken into the capstan motor circuit of a cassette recorder and tied that to the Super Relay so that when they'd hit the record and play keys, and when the jock would turn their mic on, it would allow power to go to the capstan motor and thereby automatically telescope their air checks?
I can do one better. I did it with a record player for a remote start because I had record players that didn't have remote starts. I wired one of those into the stop-start button in parallel with it and used that to start and stop the record player.
Well, if you're still running 120-volt light bulb, sorry, on the wall, that's a little passé. We're all into LEDs now. They save electricity. The turtles are happier. The penguins are happier. It saves the polar bears and all that. So we're using LEDs. And to run the LED lights, you need a Henry Superlight. It can run LEDs on its own up to 0.5 amp, and it'll sync up to 2 amps if you supply it with some external power. So you can run your on-air tally lights. You can also run your light that lights up around your microphone if you have one of those fancy schmancy mic arms that has an LED built in. But what's also on here, there's 2 RJ45 connectors on here. Now, these are not audio over IP. These are simply places where you can easily wire your start stop to for up to 4 different studios. You can give each Superlight an address up to 4 different addresses. And that way you can, if you have a situation where you have like 4 super lights that you wire them in a common wiring area, right? Like in a rack room, and then run the lighting out to the tally lights. You can put, there you go, in the bottom right of the picture here, you can see you can wire these super lights, daisy chain them together, giving each a different address, and then come off of something like your GPIO node from your AOIP system, and then you can give it, different tallies from different studios. So anyway, if that suits you, that's a good way to do it. You also get some auxiliary relay outputs here, normally closed and normally opened. You've got that normally the normally closed in case you want to like mute a phone ringer when you turn the mic on. You've got a normally closed in case you want to start that capstan. I'm sorry.
Who starts capstans? Come on now. Well, if you want to start your 8-track, you can put it right in there.
You could also take an inexpensive audio console, one that doesn't have a tally light output. You can add a switch to it, and you can mute your speakers. If your console doesn't have speaker muting, you can run your speakers through there too. So lots of possibilities there with the Henry Superlight. And of course, the place to get them is Broadcasters General Store, BGS. The website is bgs.cc, and you're welcome to use the website, but if you call them, you get to talk to a real person. You get to talk to a person who's not sick, not like me. You can call them and talk to, you can talk to Buck, you can talk to Jessica, you can talk to Hugh, you can talk to John, you can talk to any of them there, and they'll be glad to help you out. Hey, maybe Dave Kirsten will answer the phone. Call them at 352-622-7700. They do. They do have sharp pencils at Broadcasters General Store. I thought I was over this at least for 2 minutes.
I want to put one in my room with, when you hit the button, it starts the bed spinning and the disco ball comes down and it starts the jazz music. Perfect. I'm going to get one of those.
That's what you can also use it to. Now, some people have locked the studio door when they turn the mic on. Not a good idea if there's a medical emergency. Not a good idea.
No.
But some people.
I don't believe that's legal, but you could do that.
That it may not be illegal, but anyway, there you go. The Henry Superlight, the replacement for the Super Relay. And Henry makes all kinds of stuff you need. So just check them out.
Oh, they're fantastic. Yeah.
Hank's been on the show several times. Good fella. And check him out.
Yeah, they're a good example of go-tos for me when I need to solve, problems like that, require fairly simple but elegant solutions like that. So between him and Catfish and some of these other guys, those are great.
It's always worth mentioning too. Hank Landsberg does have this line of surge suppressors that really work well. They're a little bit different design than the other just MOV surge suppressors. So you ought to check those out when you're on the Henry Engineering website. So anyway, henryeng.com I think is their website. Yep. All right, Chris Tarr is with us, taking us through some things that he's learned in projects. So Chris, take it back.
All right. We'll go to picture 14 really quick. I just wanted to show you this. This is one of the nice things about my job. That's the view going up the road to my site on the Mississippi side, or on the Minnesota side of the Mississippi. Kind of a dirt road. And that's right before I go up a switchback hill up the side of a bluff, but just beautiful scenery that I get to look at all the time when I'm up doing these sites. So that is one of the nice things versus when I worked in Milwaukee, where, I'd go through downtown and I'd be in a tower farm and, I get to go out in the boonies now. So we'll go to number 15. And this is a good example of things that we're doing now to kind of up the game a little bit, is adding IP connectivity to our sites. And I'm really have gotten into, and this isn't a new thing, but it's something that we've really embraced, is the Ubiquiti radios. And the performance of them have improved so much that I actually have some sites, and this is going to be one of them, where I use them as STLs. And I'm sending audio from one site to another. I'm also able to extend our office LAN out to these sites so that I can control transmitters and send RDS information. And again, these are things that they weren't doing. So this is a whole new ball game. And it just opened up a lot of possibilities. And these radios are really inexpensive. So this is a great example, again, of where, I try to find out what the needs are and what their goals are. And they've said, well, we want to be able to do this. Well, I'm a problem solver. And I go, okay, what can we do to solve that issue? And that's what we did. So number 16, this is a translator site that we just put on. Now we're replacing some of this gear, but I thought you might like it because it's got a Unity 2000, a classic Frank Foti processor.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So this is actually that same site where the Ubiquity dish is. And this is really just a placeholder. We've got some other plans. I've got a new Gates Air transmitter that's going to go in to replace some of this other stuff. And but this is, again, an example of, we could just take an old transmitter, throw it on a shelf or leave it on the floor and call it a translator. And a lot of people do that. But we treat them like full power stations. We've got, and I'll show you one of the antennas in a minute here. We take, good equipment, we put in a nice rack, we put in power conditioning, and, we treat it as if it was a full power station. And they perform well because of that. And again, it's that whole, well, we spend a little extra money, but my boss likes to call it, it has to be Chris Tarr approved. And, this is the kind of design that I would go for. And it costs a little more, but we're not going to have any problems with that site. It's clean. The wiring is clean. The equipment is well mounted, and it's just going to run. We're not going to have any problems with that.
Chris, I want to point out that amplifier at the bottom of the rack. I think it's Armstrong branded, probably made by RVR, if I would guess.
Yes,
Armstrong branded. That is that the 500 watt model right there.
It is. Yes. Yep.
That I think among all of my stations, I think I own 2 of those, and those things are hard to kill. They are. Ours have been amazing.
Yeah, and that's one of those that I kind of set aside for temporary use for some of these projects until I get new transmitters. Mm-hmm. Now, again, here's a great example of, we've got a bunch of these translators coming online, and I also wanted to have 2 backups. So I said I talked to Nick at Gates Air, and he gave me a great deal on the 1 kilowatt Gates Air model. So I went back to our to Dave, and I said, hey, we can get this fantastic deal on these Gates Air transmitters. And he said, great, well, we're going to need probably 10. So order 10, because he wanted to do it right. It was like, well, we can buy them one at a time, maybe not get the same deal, but here's an opportunity to get a great deal on them. And we're going to want to put those at all these sites that we're building. So while we have the opportunity, let's get them, and save ourselves a lot of money now. And, we're looking ahead down the road for where these are going to go. A great example is we have a site that I'm going to be able to use as an auxiliary site for 3 of our FMs. Well, the Harris transmitter is frequency agile, so I'm going to be able to put that in there and put an antenna up, and I can have 1 transmitter for 3 aux sites, or for three FMs. So that's, again, thinking ahead and going, okay, here's something we haven't had before. And again, these are small stations, maybe don't have generators, things like that, but we'll have a little bit of diversity of RF there by being able to go to another site. We'll go to number 17, and this is another example of a translator. Now, this is a big signal for us. The main FM that's on this site is a Class B, covers a good almost third of the state down in the southwest corner, and that's the 4-bay on top. The 3-bay right below that is a translator, and that's at about 650 feet, and that covers about the same as a Class A. But if you notice, it's they're nice antennas. I had them installed with 7/8 inch line. I used a good tower company, and that translator works just amazingly well. And it was a little more expensive than if we had done it on the cheap and just put an antenna up there somewhere and called it a day. But again, it kind of comes down to working with an owner who appreciates the value of good engineering, where we pay a little more up front, but in the long run, we really get good performance out of that. So that's one of the translator sites that we have. And that's what we've been building out, is these, selecting really good sites for these translators. And if we have to pay lease somewhere to get a good site, we do that. Because again, these are opportunities to grow the organization. And so we want to take those seriously and not just look at it as an aside. Oh, it's just a 250 watt translator. Let's just throw something on. We want them to be competitive. And so those are the types of things we do. And then the final picture we have is the one that is unnumbered. And that's just a quick glimpse at a studio I'm building in La Crosse. The building we got with the sale was actually a lease, and it was the old facility, and it's way bigger than what we need, and it's an old building. So we found the perfect site, perfect building, and an office building for our studios. And as you can see, this is our main studio, and you can see just that great view out the window there, out across the river. And I found, it's just a fantastic building right on a real high point in town. So STL shots are going to be a breeze. But again, that was another great example. This console here, this Axia Surface, I bought used. I saw it online, and it was a fantastic deal. And I called Dave and I said, hey, I know we've been talking about Axia Surfaces. I just saw a great one for unbelievable price. And he said, get it, let's do it. I mean, it makes a lot of sense rather than buying new. And he's like, and you know these surfaces and these engines, and you'll know if it's good or not. So, let's do that. And the one that we had bought for that room, we're going to use somewhere else. So, I'm really excited for this facility. We're going to do some more work on it next week, and hopefully start moving people in another week or two. So those are the show and tells that I have. There's also some things where I stubbed my toe. There's some growing pains in this, and I wanted to save that for last after we went through the fun stuff. But I think the most difficult part for me is the buck stops with me now. And where I used to say, okay, I'm not sure where to go with this, or this is difficult, I'll kick it up the chain and have somebody at corporate deal with it. Working out contracts for transmitter sites. I didn't have to do any of that. We had lawyers that did that. Now I'm the one who goes through and deals with the contracts and deals with the vendors. That's all new to me. And so that really was a tough learning curve to, kind of learn what is, the good way to deal with that, the bad way to deal with that, what's a good deal, what's a bad deal, and understand that, I can't pass the buck when things don't go well. And I've had some things that we've tried and failed. And I've had to go to Dave and say, this just didn't work. And I have to be confident in my skills and in myself, my relationship with Dave to say, I'm going to have to tell you the bad news, and it's on me. And sometimes that's hard to do, where you have to stand up and go, yeah, I screwed up. It's on me. I apologize. I did this wrong. And I've had to do that a couple of times. Fortunately, not a lot. But that is one of the things in this position. I also have to do FCC filings, and it's a whole different world from just being out in the trenches. I'm fortunate in that I get to do that. But then the other issue that I have is that I work from home, so I don't have an office anywhere but the house. So sometimes I remember what day it is because they all just kind of run into each other. So that's kind of some of the pitfalls that we have doing this.
Chris, we're talking to Chris Tarr on This Week in Radio Tech. Chris is my new permanent co-host, and as long as the checks don't bounce, I guess he'll be here each week. Hey, Chris, our show is brought to you in part by the folks at Angry Audio. And look what I've got here, Chris. This is something new from Angry Audio. It is a world panel. Now, Chris, I worked at a lot of mostly pretty small stations. We never did something as fancy as a world panel. We would just, grab some wires and wrap them around something and give the feed to the TV crew. But did you ever do any world panels yourself, Chris?
I haven't done those. I do use a lot of his gear though. So I am interested in seeing this.
Yeah. So the idea of a world panel is you have inputs to your audio console and outputs from your console, or whatever you want. Typically it's your console in a control room. And the idea is that it gives you isolated inputs and outputs so that like a TV crew can come in and say, hey, we want to shoot a story about your morning jock, or about your fundraiser or the Lions Club or whatever it may be that's going on, your radio auction, and we need an audio feed. Well, sometimes it's hard to do. And hey, you never know about the quality of the gear that people are attaching your signal to. And so you don't want to just, jumper across the program feed, even though you may want a program feed. Well, a world panel, not all of them are isolated. Some are just passive. This one from the folks at Angry Audio, and it's a Studio Hub branded from Angry Audio. This is an isolated and buffered audio input and output device for your audio console to give you inputs and outputs. So somebody could bring a cassette player in. They could bring an 8-track player. They could bring a Victrola in that has got tubes in it and plugs in the wall. You could, because these are all isolated, and so you've got digital and analog inputs and outputs here. The digital inputs and outputs can be either SPDIF or AES-EBU. You've got a ground lifter switch here on some of the analog, so there's that. You've got RCA connections. You've got 3.5 millimeter tip ring sleeve connections here. So lots of different connections that you may need to hose into your system. So anyway, that's the new world panel from Studio Hub. And of course, Angry Audio bought Studio Hub, and that means they have the full selection of all your favorite adapters to build your studios quickly. Chris, you've never seen these before, have you? These little adapters to build out your radio station?
No, never. I don't have a whole box of it in my car. No.
That they have them in both styles of connectors, country and western. So
nice.
Whatever you need. If you need a long cable, they got long cables with like a male XLR on one end. Or what I like to do is I like the short cables here. They have the female XLR, and then you just take your Cat 5 cable and go from here to wherever you need to go. Of course, Cat 5 cable is all balanced. It's twisted. It's got a great common mode rejection ratio, CMRR. So you can run mic level through this pretty good distance. You can run line level, of course, and whatever kind of style connector you need, they've probably got it. You ought to check it out at angryaudio.com. Go to the website, angryaudio.com. Oh, and the headphone disconnector. Oh my goodness, this is cool. Yeah. So here's the headphone disconnector. This is for your talent that can't remember to take their headphones off when they get up. Maybe they got them around their neck. So you just plug this in line with their headphones, right? Into the jack, into the headphone amp. And when they get up, they didn't break anything. And it just goes right back together magnetically. Isn't that cool? The headphone disconnector from Angry Audio. Okay, good. Hey, appreciate the sponsorship from angryaudio.com. All right. Hey, Max Connect Wireless. I know that Chris is familiar with Max Connect Wireless. We're going to hear a quick testimonial. We'll be right back with our last segment with Chris Tarr.
I'm Gary Morrill, Midwest Regional Director of Engineering for Alpha Media. When I first spoke with Josh Bone about Max Connect, he told me they'd work great for remote transmitter sites where connectivity was a challenge. And he's absolutely right. We even have sites where we're using this as a backup to our STL using Max Connect's dual carrier option, and it works perfectly. We also have times where we need to be able to get out to a venue where it's kind of challenging because everybody and his brother is trying to stream video at the same time, like at a big sporting event. And you know what? Our data gets through every time because it's prioritized packet data. It works for us. It'll work for you. Max Connect. Check it out.
These are even providing data, or they can provide data, to Chris Tarr's transmitter site way out in the Wisconsin Dells or wherever the heck he is. Those pretty transmitter sites that don't have very many towers around. Check it out, maxconnect.com. It's spelled funny. We've got a link in the show notes. You can look at it right there, maxxkonnect.com. Appreciate Josh Bone and what he has done for our industry in making remote transmitter sites accessible and with fixed IP addresses, and also making remote broadcasts workable. Even when there's a lot of other people around checking their Facebook or whatever, it works. Max Connect Wireless. Chris, we got just a few minutes left to go. What would you like to finish up with here, sir?
Sure. A couple of parting things. First of all, Angry Audio. I bought a couple of their distribution amplifiers. He makes some solid gear. I mean, this is not your basic aluminum, bad, cheap power supply gear. This is the real deal, and it's really made for our applications and to live in kind of, live under not so perfect conditions. So I really do. When you mention that, I recommend his gear, wholeheartedly. It's really well built. Another tip is with those Studio Hub connectors. One of the best things about them is you can easily make gender changers. You can, in a pinch, obviously the best thing to do is use some sort of transformer to transform the audio. But let's say in a pinch you need to go from XLR to RCA or whatever, you just build the cable right there with the Cat5. So I keep a stock of all of these different connectors in my Jeep along with Cat5. So if I run into a situation where I've got to throw something together at the last minute with a cable, I've got the stuff right there. So, it's a great thing to put in your toolbox along with the antenna analyzer that I showed you earlier, is just buy a few of those connectors and have them on hand along with Cat5. And then, back with Josh and Max Connect, I do use one as a full-time STL at a station in Kewaunee, Wisconsin, and it works fantastic. So, cool. Again, those are all things that, again, it's working smarter and realizing that, some of this stuff up front sounds like it's expensive and it doesn't make a lot of sense for a small budget. But our job is to convince these people and show them how this actually helps out in the long run and how this is so much better than getting to a site and going, oh, there's a cable I don't have. We're having to put in a different processor and it requires different connectors than what I have. Now what? Well, I can run out to the Jeep, I can throw something together and get it back on the air. An antenna analyzer, what's wrong? Okay, let's fix it. So that was one of the big things with this job is being able to have the equipment and the ability to troubleshoot and make things happen on the road on the fly, so that our uptime has gone from, counting off the air time in hours in a month to minutes in a month, because we're now equipped with all of these different tools to really make sure that we stay on the air.
Gotcha. Cool. We've got a minute or two left. Was there any parting words that you want to leave us with? You said, I wish we weren't out of time. I know you've got more stories to tell. We'll have to save those for future shows. But we do have a couple minutes here if you need to.
I will say I am completely blessed. This is a dream job. I no longer have an office. My office is my Jeep. I get to do all of these different transmitter sites. I get to work with all this different gear. I am in control of the destiny. I'm not having to agree or disagree with mandates that are one size fits all. I can come up with different scenarios for different stations. I get to work directly with the decision maker. We have a very good relationship. He has a lot of trust in me, and a lot, I very rarely, I'll talk to him for an hour or two at a time about business, but, he never checks out, where are you at? What are you doing? Where are you going to be? He trusts me to get done what I get done. On the other hand, it really is a whole different level of engineering. I'm now directly responsible for all of these stations and making sure that they're running. So it's not a matter of, somebody else will take care of that if something's off the air or something's working. It's up to me to decide who's going to handle it and what needs to be done. And if we need to order stuff for it, if we need to, if we need to have something done at a site, I have to get the quotes, and each site is different. So it requires, I have to take a lot of pictures, a lot of notes, because there are sites I don't get to very often that, I got to remember, okay, what transmitter is there? So I've started putting cameras in so I can see. But it is, I'm very blessed to be able to do this. It is, but it is something that's completely different from anything I've ever done. So
it's going to be interesting.
It's scary. It's very scary at the same time.
Over the next year, we're going to continue, of course, to have plenty of guests, and Chris and I will both be interviewing guests, finding out information from, other different disciplines, different manufacturers, different engineers. But it's going to be interesting to hear Chris's perspective as we go through the year, where one of Chris's few constraints in his decision-making about engineering is what makes sense to do. Because it sounds like, Chris, you've got a cooperative business partner, a reasonable person, somebody who's, hey, I've worked for station owners that said, we don't run this place with an open checkbook. Well,
right.
I get that. But, your tower's going to fall down unless you spend some money on it.
Right. And that is, for me, that is also something new, is that I am part of the management team. So, I do take care of managing staff members. I take care of managing budget. I am responsible, for how we spend our money and make sure that it's wise. So, again, that's all new because there's my dog wanting to go out. That is new because not only am I an engineer, but I'm also part of the management team that runs the group. So I have to be smart and go, I would love new transmitters everywhere, but financially that doesn't make sense. So how do we do this in a way that makes sense?
Well, I look forward to hearing from your perspective over the next bunch of shows. Hopefully we'll do another 51 or so shows this month. But right now, we got to go. Folks, Chris Tarr, if you haven't figured it out by now, Chris is the new co-host of the show with me. I'm absolutely delighted to have Chris on. We're going to have a huge variety of guests on our show over the next year. And hey, look out. You may be a guest too. If you're asked, come on, be a guest. Let's hear what you have to say and to add to the conversation. All right, we got to run. I want to give a big thanks, of course, to Chris Tarr. Also, big thanks to Suncast, the producer of each and every show of This Week in Radio Tech. Also, thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. And please go see our sponsors. Give them a call. Go to their website. Check them out. Buy their stuff. That helps keep them going and encourages them to keep advertising with us. So we really appreciate that. We got to run. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech.